Hello. I request all the persons to come inside and be seated. We are now starting the panel discussion. I request Dr. M.D. Srinivas to kindly come on stage. So, Dr. M.D. Srinivas is once again a great scholar in the Indian knowledge systems as well as modern science. He earned his PhD in theoretical physics from a reputed university in the United States of America, and he is also credited with authoring one of the first books on the combining traditional knowledge and modern science. It was called as Annam Bahu Kurvita, which also gave a great description about how much food was produced in India, etc., and how India was one of the richest countries in those days as far as and self-sufficient as far as food grains, etc., was concerned. And also, of late, he has done a tremendous amount of work on cataloging of manuscripts pertaining to mathematics and also their utility. So I welcome him on behalf of Samskriti Foundation and request him to chair the session. Next, I call upon Dr. Pramod Shankaran, who is representing the Department of Science and Technology, a senior scientist with a lot of passion for Indian knowledge systems. He is piloting the Science Heritage Research Initiative program, and also I am very happy to let you know that he is also my close friend. I request him to kindly come on stage. I request Professor Sri Ramesh Srinivas Raghavan to kindly come on stage. We have already introduced him. And next, I request Shashikant Pandey to kindly come on stage and take his seat. So, without much formality, I hand over the Shashikant. Yes. As I mentioned, Dr. Pramod is a dynamic scientist and scholar who specializes in various branches of traditional knowledge. As a scientist in charge of the Science Heritage Research Initiative, he is pioneering several unique and distinguished programs that are aimed at scientifically validating several aspects of traditional knowledge and proving their contemporary relevance in the modern world. And as far as Shashikant Pandey is concerned, he is a scientist at SETS, Chennai. He received his PhD from Department of Mathematics, University of Delhi, and completed Master of Science from Banaras Hindu University. His research focuses on Boolean functions and more specifically on cryptographic and combinatorial characterization of Boolean functions. His interests include mathematics, poetry, and music. His project, Poetic Presentation of Mathematics and Its Pedagogy, received the National Award from NCERT, Delhi. He has also authored and published several papers on mathematics, education, and poetry. So, this is a brief introduction to his personality. I now request Dr. M.D. Srinivas to kindly take over and conduct the session.
My salutations to my Acharya, late Professor Lakshmi Tatacharya Swamiji, and to Professor Alwar Swamiji. It's a great honor to take part in this seminar, which is dealing with both very ancient and very contemporary subjects at the same time. So we are going to have a panel discussion which we will have for about half an hour between ourselves, or 35 minutes. Then about 10 minutes, we will have some comments from or questions from the audience. We will wind up by 3:25. I am very honored to have these co-panelists who are really experts in this subject. So I will initially offer some general comments on the theme of this seminar and its historical setting and its future possibilities, without going into the details in depth of the kind of technologies that we have to look into and all that, which will be perhaps the main concern of the panelists. Samiksha, to explore the utility and relevance of Sanskrit Indian knowledge systems for information and communication tools. This is roughly the theme of the seminar. Of course, there is a reverse issue also, which has also been considered here. Explore the utility and relevance of information and communication tools for advancing Sanskrit and Indian knowledge systems. In fact, a large number of talks were in relation to that also. Now, while discussing this, perhaps we should not forget that all of Indian knowledge is not just contained in Sanskrit alone. In fact, a majority of our population continue to be informed with large aspects of our civilizational wisdom and knowledge through their own languages, which are closely linked to the corresponding Sanskritic tradition and the Sanskritic corpus. But more than that, even many highly erudite works are to be found in all our what we call regional languages. You should not call them vernaculars. It's a very derogatory term. Varna is the name of a slave's household, and vernacular was used in Europe for all the local languages as against the cultural language of Latin. Now, in my own domain, I know there's a text called Ganita Yukti Bhasha in Malayalam, written in 1530, 1540, which contains the proofs of almost all the advanced mathematics that the Kerala mathematicians did. And it's in a very beautiful prose Malayalam. It almost reads like a text. In fact, one of the mathematicians, Professor Divakaran, called it the first textbook of calculus. And Professor Alvar and many others here will let you know that some of the most intricate philosophical discussion of Sri Vaishnavite philosophy are to be found in what are called the Rahasya Granthas and their commentaries, which is all in Manipravanam Tamil. In fact, the kind of understanding they provide of the philosophical position of Sri Vaishnavism and the social and the ethical conduct of a Sri Vaishnava is really not to be found in Sanskritic corpus. And that's why it's all called Ubhaya Vedanta. Similarly, we have Guru Granth Sahib, Ramcharitmanas, etc., and many similar texts all over India which are given almost the standing of revelation or the Vedic corpus. So, we should sort of, while talking about Indian knowledge, we should keep it in mind that a substantial amount of it, and perhaps a large amount of it which is relevant for ordinary life, is contained in ordinary Indian languages, the regional languages. Now, second is, we always think of Indian knowledge as ancient. I think this is also a misconception. Till about 200 years ago, all of Indian knowledge was taught, learnt and practiced widely all over the country, with some ups and downs in different parts of India due to political upheavals one way or the other. And they were not just repeating what was done long time ago. Many of the most erudite texts in Nyaya or Vyakarana or philosophy or even in mathematics have been written in 18th century and continue to be written in 19th century also. But of course we know what has happened, so we should not forget that much of our traditional knowledge has come under eclipse. And large part of it is due to the education system implanted by the British. But the error is equally due to the fact that after independence, we did not bring in all of Indian knowledge into our regular or mainstream academia. Today we have some 1,000 universities, 15,000, 20,000 colleges, 2 crore students studying in higher education in India. But none of them are exposed to any branch of Indian knowledge systematically. There are many branches of our knowledge which continue to flourish with high level of scholarship, like in Vyakarana, like in Darshanas, like in Ayurveda, and we can like in Sangeeta. But even there, the amount of our source texts, the amount of older knowledge that was known to people 4, 5 generations ago, 10 generations ago, that is not being continued to be studied with the same level of seriousness. So even in that domain, where this tradition has continued, we have been somewhat lax in the last 75 years in preserving it, in teaching it, taking it forward. As a consequence, we should realize the comprehension we have in public of our Indian knowledge. What can be called, say, if you ask anybody who is a scholar in an area to say what is known about that discipline, he may be a scholar of Indian mathematics. But what he or she will be able to tell you will only be a part of what somebody would have said 200 years ago or even 100 years ago. So many things we are rediscovering. So in my field of mathematics or astronomy, I can say we did not know the fact that there is a very famous Indian equation called Varga Prakriti, quadratic indeterminate equation. A method was found called Chakrawala, which is described by Jayadeva Bhaskara, 12th century. People thought this was same as this problem was studied in Europe in 18th century by Euler and Lagrange. It was posed as a problem in 17th century by Fermat. Their method is what people say Chakrawala is the same method, because the first European who translated this book, Colebrook, said this is the same method, but Indians knew it 7th, 8th centuries earlier. Only when Indian scholars started looking at it carefully, in 1920s, 1930s, one Professor Krishnaswamy Iyengar, who is better known by the name of his son A.K. Ramanujan. So he showed that Chakrawala is much better. It's about 30% more optimal. I mean, this is an example about 80, 100 years ago. Professor K.V. Sharma showed 40, 50 years ago that the Kerala mathematicians knew infinite series, knew many other aspects of calculus. They also developed a planetary model which was very similar to what Kepler developed. Recently, 10 years ago, in Bangalore showed that the Vedic corpus has very clear description of a pole star in a constellation called Chichumara, which is called Alpha Draconis. And that star would have been a pole star in 2800 BC. As you know, due to precession of equinoxes, this pole star keeps shifting. Today's pole star is in the Alpha Ursa Minoris constellation. So like this, I can go on reciting. So our knowledge of Indian knowledge systems in any domain is very partial, incomplete, tentative, progressing, we can perhaps make a comprehensive account, maybe in a generation or so, if we study them very seriously in all our universities and we teach them in school to our children, and only when such a situation develops, we can confidently talk of Indian knowledge system and how much it will be of use for advancing information and communication tools or any other aspects of modern science and technology. With these preliminary remarks, I call upon my co-panelists to speak on the future prospects of Sanskrit IKS and ICT.
Thank you, sir. Um, Thank you for the wonderful context setting. One of the things that I also wanted to talk about was how do we structure this conversation? And I thought I will suggest a framework based on which I will talk, but of course, we can improve upon this. So I thought if we wanted to do this, let's start with what are the goals, right? I'm a product manager, so I thought I'll apply my own discipline also to this. So what are we actually trying to do? What are the goals? So I look at the goals as possibly these three things. There could be many more, but the way I look at it is that there are three goals. One is we want to build tools, and I'll dig in a little bit more deeper into tools. The other goal is that we want to preserve knowledge, and a lot has been talked about that as well. The third thing is also that we want to advance computing. I'm not saying this in any particular order, but these are broadly the three aspects that a lot of the talks have covered as well. So if I take tools specifically, if I wear my product management hat, the first thing that comes to your mind is who is going to use this tool and for what, right? So I look at it as two broad uses, if I may say so. One is a person who is doing research, he needs certain tools. The other is someone who wants to learn, he needs some tools. So these are two broad categories. So if you take research further, then what kind of research? There could be a person doing research in linguistics. That linguistics may be related to Sanskrit. It could be other languages. It could be, comparative linguistics even. So there are tools that are required for all of these things also, right? So the other thing is someone who wants to learn language, appreciate language, or do research in language. So for example, you might want to know the usage of a particular phrase or a phrase word or anything like that across a wide corpus. It may not necessarily be possible for everyone to digest all the rich knowledge that we have today. But for a researcher, it becomes very important because he is focused on a particular topic and he wants to be able to do this very efficiently. So there might be those kinds of tools. Then when you come to learning, yesterday there was a wonderful talk on learning tools and how important it is to actually create a learning path. And I can say this with some humility from myself. There are a lot of people who want to work in this area, which I call as an area which involves broadly at least two disciplines. One is Indian knowledge systems, traditional knowledge, and modern knowledge. So usually one is good in the other and one is seeking to learn the other. So if we want to have a sustainable model, we need to have a good number of bridge builders who are equally comfortable with both of these things. Now, what is it that the bridge builder needs to learn? What tools does that person need, right? And that can be at various levels. There might be a need for bridge builders at the level of undergraduate programs or postgraduate programs at doctoral level. So when you think about tools, there is this wide gamut of tools that all come into play here. And then, of course, what about researchers in computing itself? There are people who are doing computing research. So today, also someone was talking about how you can take Vedic mathematics and build maybe new arithmetic logic units and explore that. So how do we draw inspiration from traditional knowledge and see and quickly do experiments with simulations or hardware or whatever it is? So there are a wide variety, there's a wide gamut of tools here. And I feel that the time has come for us to kind of look at it a little bit more specifically. Instead of just say Sanskrit, traditional knowledge systems and ICT, we need to probably drill down a little bit deep and maybe look at this. And that is the intent with which I'm proposing that we look at it in this way. So some of the challenges that I myself have faced as a bridge builder is precisely this. That's what makes me say all of these things, that it's very difficult. I'm more from the technology angle, but I have a lot of interest in Sanskrit. But how should I learn this? Where do I start? And what is the path for me? I don't need to just know something right now. That is a point that I wanted to say. If I take the other goal, which is about preservation of knowledge, I want to talk about one thing specifically here. Apart from all of the other things that we all mentioned, one reason why I think preserving knowledge is becoming very, very important today is because if you look at some of the generative AI tools that are there, they're all based on data that is available freely on the internet. Whether you take a generative AI program like GPT or DALI, which is actually going to generate images, it is based on other data that is there. And if you look at the data that is available on the internet, that may or may not represent all the data. There are a lot of errors of omission and commission also. So we might end up generating narratives which are not really suitable for us. Therefore, it is important to represent knowledge equally